You are listening to When Therapists Watch TV, where we discuss today's buzzworthy TV shows and what they can teach us about ourselves, our relationships, and the world around us. I'm your host, Dr. Terry Bly, licensed clinical psychologist at LE Mental Health. Today is my 50th birthday. And I know that I'm saying this on camera and that's not something women are supposed to do, but I want to do it because on the one hand, I'm really proud to have made it this far. My 40s were pretty miserable. There were a lot of challenges, a lot of things to kind of overcome and figure out. And so just getting here feels like an accomplishment. And so on the one hand, I am proud to say that I am 50 years old and kind of kicking ass. Like I'm feeling good about where I'm at here at 50. On the other hand, I know why women don't state their age when they're in that late 40s into their 50s. And let's face it, recently in the news, Don Lemon provided a really good illustration of why we don't like to talk about our age when he said the quiet part out loud, which was that women are in their prime, in their 20s, 30s, and 40s, and once they hit 50, society just kind of wants to escort them into the background. And I've definitely felt some of that. I have felt myself become less visible, less relevant. My ideas seem to hit differently than they would have in my 30s. I feel like my, the doors are closing. There are doors that are closing despite the fact that I have, close to 20 years left in my career. I am fully aware that the world is no longer my oyster. And I don't like that. And so I want to do today's show, I want to talk about ageism, because I don't like it. I don't like being, I don't like that sense of being less relevant, not because of how I'm feeling or the ideas I have to bring to the table or the wisdom I have to share. It just is because of my age. And that's weird, uncomfortable, and like I said, I don't like it. When I was thinking about TV shows that talk about ageism, the show Hacks came to mind. And so that's the one we're going to talk about today. If you haven't seen the show, I highly recommend it. Deborah Vance is so Gene Sharp plays Deborah Vance, this aging comedian. She's probably in her 70s. And she is kind of being nudged out of the spotlight, and a young woman named Ava, a Gen Zer, is sent in to kind of help her refresh her act, with the assumption being that bringing in a young 20-something, she'll have these fresh new ideas, and somehow that's what this older woman needs to stay relevant, although it turns out it wasn't actually a sincere effort to revamp Deborah's career. But the point is that it kind of establishes this idea that an older person needs a younger person to help them stay relevant, or that she wouldn't be able to come up with her own ideas. And we're going to talk some about the show, but really what we're going to talk about today is what it's like for women to enter into that 40s, 50s, 60s, even 70s, when they still want to be in their career, they still want to be relevant, but society is telling them no, and moving them into roles like mentor or consultant, the kinds of jobs that don't get promoted, that are really there to help younger people get their career going. So to do that today, I brought in two guests, and I'm very excited to have them both here. I will let them introduce themselves, and they are going to help me talk about ageism for women. Thank you both so much for coming, for doing this brave thing of talking about kind of something that people don't want to talk about. I don't think people like to talk about ageism.
Oh, old women. Yep.
Old women, exactly. I know, and I'll let you guys introduce yourselves in a second, but one thing that I want to make really clear here is that I am aware that some of you are probably already thinking, well, what about racism? What about ableism? And yes, and yes, let's keep talking about discrimination in the workplace and in society, and yes, let's talk about ableism. And also, ageism has huge consequences for women, whether it's their income potential or their ability to support their families. It definitely affects us mentally, psychologically, emotionally. It takes a toll on women too. And so, yes, I know there are other forms of discrimination that warrant constant conversations too, but I don't want that to take away from the importance of these discussions. So with that, now I'm gonna let you guys introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Laura, and I am 52 years old.
All right.
I can't believe I'm saying that. I know, which is like...
Does it feel a little scary?
Oh, it's always
Yeah,
scary. And
yeah.
it really bothers me that it bothers me to say that. I've worked in advertising most of my career, which is a very, you don't go to retirement parties in advertising. And that's men or women. It gets very narrow at the top, and for the most part, unless you're kind of very, very senior role, there's just not a lot of people over 45. Especially I'm a creative. In the creative world, there's very much that perception that it's the younger people that kind of bring the juice and bring the fire and all of that. So so my age has always been a really scary thing to talk about, and it didn't really get scary until probably my mid 40s, and then you start becoming very, very aware of it. But it bothers me though too, because it's like, that 52 years represents tons of life experience, just tons of professionalism, just tons of moments that like I should be super proud of, and I should be like putting my stake in the ground about like, I did all this stuff and I've done all these things, but yet I still say like, at 52, and you say it with a little bit of a cringe.
Yeah, almost a little apology.
A little bit of an apology. Yeah. So anywho, we'll get into more aspects of that, but more on 52.
And Jennifer.
Yeah, I'm Jennifer Joseph. I am a child psychologist, and I am 50 in August, so I'm the young one of the bunch.
I'm the old lady.
So I'm almost there, but certainly feeling that, right? Like feeling like it's just right there. And I think, I don't know, in some ways, like remember when you were a kid and like what 50 was like when you were a kid, right?
Yeah.
Like, and how old people were when they were 50, and now like here I am, and it's like, oh my gosh, how did that happen? And how do I understand that, right?
Speaking of, did you know in the Golden Girls?
I know, isn't that crazy?
So in the Golden Girls, they were, I think one of them when it first started was supposed to be like 47. I think Blanche was supposed to be 47, and the rest of them were like low 50s. Yeah. And they, they
I
looked
don't see
like
myself in them.
I do not see myself in the Golden Girls.
Yeah.
I'm not ready to like pack up and move to Florida.
Yeah.
And like live on
and
the
carry
lanai.
my bag right here.
Yeah.
I'm just
and get my hair set in rollers.
They had like a roller set. All of them had like a roller set hair.
Yeah.
But I can't. Those actresses that were playing that were not that young then either.
Yeah.
So I don't know, but I think that goes back to Hollywood's sort of.
Absolutely, a definition, and the definition is evolving somewhat, but there's a cap, right? And I think that that's what we're thinking about in some ways today too, is like there's that arbitrary cap, and it depends on what field you're in, where that cap is, and it depends on kind of what your life experiences are in terms of if there's any space there to kind of find yourself within that. So,
and I think, I was doing some research on this too, that, women CEOs, and they make up like 5% of CEOs. But almost all of them have been at the company they're now CEOs of their whole careers. That male CEOs have usually only been there for 10, maybe 15 years. They got recruited then to become CEOs, but women don't get recruited later in life to then get on that track. That the way you become a leader as a woman is you start when you're young and have lots of potential, right? You're a hypo, as they call it, in talent management, and then you work your way up. But
you have to work your way into it versus swagger your way into it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I was also reading that women are considered most viable, like their careers are they're most relevant or most respected between the ages of like 35 and 45. Or 30
there
and
is
45.
A sweet spot, right? Like there is a strange sweet spot.
And what's so weird about the sweet spot is that's also when we're raising children, most of us.
Yeah.
And so the times when you're supposed to be most relevant, supposedly most relevant in your career, is also the time when you have the least amount of time to devote to your career.
Yeah.
And so when your kids are starting to, to launch, and you finally got more time, and you're starting to feel like you know who you are and you know what you want, you get out there.
And then you get the question, can you explain the gap in your resume?
Right. Exactly. And also like nobody like cares that now that you're in your late 40s and wanting to launch your career, and people are like, no.
Yeah.
So I can talk a little bit about my experience with getting older, but Laura, have you being in the ad agency, I know creative agencies is where we tend to see it the most. Like the numbers in Hollywood continue to be just horrifying. Even if they're getting marginally better in television, movies, it's still like, 6% of characters, female characters are over 45 or whatever. So what has been your experience? You lived in New York. I know New York kind of worships youth as well.
Yeah.
So tell me a bit about your experience.
Yeah, I mean, I think advertising, in the creative part of advertising kind of worships youth, also worships men as well.
Right, okay.
It used to be, the percentage used to be was 3% of all creative directors were women. So that's sort of like hitting a certain point in your career. That number's gone up, and there's been a very kind of proactive initiative to kind of drive that number up. But then, that's also the more kind of women of a certain age kind of taking up the senior roles. That's also stepping on the toes of those were for the men of that age.
Oh,
So
okay.
there's a little bit of friction there. I think I know a lot of men that are very not happy with, the kind of space that sort of women over 50 have taken up in the industry. But yeah, no, it's a young person's game. I think what's interesting is there's generational things happening as well. I think there's very different attitudes about work between Gen Z, millennials,
Sure.
Gen Xers. I'm a Gen Xer. And honestly, I think some of the really bad traits of Gen X, which are like we're grinders, we like don't necessarily put our lives first, all that. There are a little bit of a saving grace in terms just because it's like our work ethic is almost unhealthy at times. But that's been very interesting as you hit a certain age. And I think a lot, especially the Gen Zers, they're like, I'm prioritizing a lot of my life stuff. I'm saying no to a lot of things. And it's been super interesting because that always used to be like the young kids were the ones that would come in and they were the fire and they were the ones that are going to work until 2 in the morning and all that. They're not doing that anymore.
Oh,
They're
I
like,
hadn't thought
I'm
about
leaving
that.
at 5, which I'm like, I'm so impressed that they're drawing those boundaries. But it's kind of interesting because it's kind of reshuffling, I think, the concept of age within the industry. Because I think, for good or for bad, I think some of the older people have proved sort of the value just because, we're grinders.
Right.
But it's like, but then what is that saying about us? Like, again,
Right.
like going back to, am I only here just because I'm willing to like tough it out? And
Right.
I'm willing to, at a certain age, you want to be able to like take a step back and like, I want to work smarter, not harder.
The question that came to my mind is if it's one thing for someone who's 25 to say like I'm leaving at 5 and everyone's like, oh, that's great, good job setting boundaries. I wonder if somebody who's older does that, is there the risk of like, well, they are getting older, they probably can't work as hard, or I don't know, like does that attitude work or do you have to work harder or like do more to prove that you're still?
I think that's my favorite thing is when I get together in groups of, sometimes I'll work with like a strategist and other creatives, and when it's a bunch of senior people, probably over 40, probably over 45, we're so fast. Like that's like amazing, like when we get together, because you're just sort of like, we know what we're doing, we can like knock stuff out, and that's incredible. And I think that's a little intimidating, honestly, to some of the younger people when they see that.
So why do you think so? If there's so much ageism in the ad industry, but you're saying your experiences when you get together with people of similar age as you, you're still able to do really good stuff and quickly. So where is that coming from? Where is it coming from, this belief that you have to be younger to do the work?
I think when you look at also the kinds of products that we advertise for, it's just now that there are different industries emerging where it's products catering to people over 40, and like luckily the boomers are just such a big group. They've helped kind of initiate that. But like when you look at sort of what people consider the growth industries and the really money industries, they're for people in their 20s. Those are when you start having a lot of disposable income, and a lot of the new products and a lot of the new things are marketed at them. There's not a lot of stuff marketed at people over 40. And I think the demographics kind of shifting with the boomers have shifted that a little bit.
So do you think the mindset is like you have to be of that generation to know how to market to that generation?
And I think that's a big problem in advertising. That's the role when you work in advertising, is to learn how to be a chameleon and think about how other people might perceive stuff. And you always want to be bringing in like younger, fresher influences. I'm not listening to new music the way I used to. There are lots of things I'm not gobbling up culturally the way I was when I was younger. So I like working with younger people because I like kind of getting that from them, and hopefully I'm giving to them some of my experience, and like, this is how I found is a good way to get to insights or get to creative solutions. So I think having those two groups together is amazing, because you do build off of each other.
Which I do like about hacks. Like, I do think they show that like there is benefit
Yes.
for learning from each other.
Yes.
That it's not a one-directional learning process, that we can learn from people who are younger, get their perspective on stuff. And also, Ava learns a ton from Deborah as well. You know, she learns.
But I mean, I would say she learns a lot from Deborah, like, not on purpose. Do you know what I mean? Like, I don't know that she's open to learning from Deborah. Like, I think that she's there, and she's thinking that she needs to teach Deborah what's funny and what's right and how to do it. And so I think that she changes right through the course of the season, because she vicariously or kind of absorbs some things that she probably wasn't open to, like, hearing directly or being, like, open to, like, having a discussion about or thinking about.
True, she does kind of learn by accident.
Yeah,
from Deborah.
yeah.
So what about you, Jen? How have you experienced getting older?
I was surprised. And I think that's when you first, like, talked to me about doing this episode, I was thinking kind of about the idea, and I don't know that I've experienced ageism per se, but what most occurred to me is, like, how surprising everything was. And so, like, by everything I mean, like, the changes, like that, like menopause, like my eyebrows falling out, or my hair getting thinner, or, you know, the changes in my body and kind of how I look and how I feel. And, like, I thought, why is this a surprise? Like, why is this a secret?
Because we don't ever talk about it.
We don't ever talk about it. We don't ever talk about it. And why is it?
We try to cover it up.
We try and cover it up. We hide it. We pay a lot of money to try and cover it up, right?
Yes, we do.
We hide as much as we can. We try and say, no, I don't have wrinkles, or no, I don't have this fat bulge, or whatever it is. And we pay a lot of money to hide it. But at the same time, like, nobody tells you that these things are going to happen. And so it's really surprising when it does. And I think that that's kind of depressing, right? Like, all of a sudden, people see you differently, and all of a sudden you see yourself differently. And you feel different. Like, your body just feels different. And you're like, is this normal? And where did this come from? And why? Why? But I mean, at the same time, it's like, you kind of know that, like, this is getting older, and people say getting older sucks and all of that, and you kind of know, but you don't really know, like, the details, right? And so, like, I don't know, I'm a child psychologist, so kind of from a developmental lens too, like, you're thinking, like, we spend a lot of time thinking about development. And, like, you know, toddlers are supposed to be doing this, and this is what happens to their bodies. And preteens are supposed to be doing this, and this is what happens to their bodies. And here's 1,000 books on what might happen to your body, right? And here's 1,000 books on what might happen to your body if you choose to have a baby. There's just all of these, and then it stops.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
And then it stops. And so developmentally, we're still developing. Like, women that are 50, 52, 48, 40, we're still developing, and we're still on kind of that lifespan development. And, like, why is it such a secret?
But I'm wondering too, is it, I mean, because of menopause, so we have basically, like, another moment that men don't have. Men just continue getting older. But we literally there's literally a moment. I'm wondering if we're not talking about it, because it's, you know, it's almost like our getting older bar mitzvah, a little bit, menopause, where it signals a moment where you turn a corner. And men don't have that. They just have a continual sort of thing. And I'm wondering if we don't talk about menopause, because it does signal. It says, like, it's here. Like, you are in a different stage of life.
You're in a different stage of life, and, like, your reproductive purpose.
I feel like it's you're turning a corner, but not to a better place. Like, in terms, like, I don't but I mean, Terry, like, in the eyes of other people. Like, I feel like saying I've gone through menopause I don't know why. I can't like put my finger on it, but there's part of me that's like, I would not want to say that.
Yeah.
Well, it's because we think it's tied to sex, because it's like our fertility. So then it's tied to our sexuality, and it like literally defines your age. Like you don't necessarily have to say your age most of the time. And you talk about menopause, people are like, okay, you're in this, you're in this.
You're old.
Yeah,
but
you're
I think
old.
it's so interesting, and I really haven't thought about it from a male perspective. So I mean, I'm sure somebody else could argue the other perspective, but like from a female perspective, it feels like these important arcs in our life are really kept out of discussions. So like important arcs, like being menstrual cycles, we don't talk about periods, right? In open discussion, we don't talk about menopause. And for the love of God, we do not talk about what it's like after having a baby, right? Like these baby books, great, but they do not prepare us in a way for that emotional and physical change. And nobody tells you about like the stuff that happens, right? And so it feels like in some ways, like being a woman, it's all of these important developmental tasks are kept so secret.
And they happen to be the ones that men don't experience.
They happen to be the ones that men don't experience, and for some reason they're taboo or not like appropriate to talk about, right?
But I even remember when I turned, I hadn't thought about turning 40 at all. I was in my 30s doing my thing, and I remember very clearly my 40th birthday. All of a sudden it hit me where I was like, I don't want to tell people how old I am. I'm not going to post on Facebook, I turned 40 today. I don't want anyone to know. And I was stunned because I wasn't expecting that. I had given it literally no thought at all.
That's interesting, yeah.
And then on my 40th
what did that
birthday,
mean to you? Do you remember?
it just meant something was going away. Like it just meant like the thought I had at the time was, I feel like my stock value just plummeted. I just had this sense of like, I think on some level, I wonder if I'm like, I don't know, this sounds dramatic, but like I had just think of like, am I worth less now? Like in society, is my value, perceived value, my perceived contribution, my perceived visibility or whatever it is it, I think it's about to go down. And it just like gutted me.
But so much of this, I think, is because we were trained that our value as women was based on basically our hotness and our ability.
Yeah.
And
it's like that Amy Schumer sketch, the last fuckable day.
The last fuckable day. Yeah. And
there it is.
And no matter how many times we tell ourselves that's like we were programmed from the start, that basically our sort of how we protect ourselves in terms of our age and our sexuality is the most important thing.
It's the most important thing.
Which is why you end up with like the women, like have you guys heard about almond moms?
No.
It's basically
almond.
Yeah.
Oh,
It's basically like a lot of like our mother's generation. Like they basically like they subsist on like almonds.
Yeah.
Because they're
like if you're hungry, here's an
almond. Yeah, because they were so trained that the most important thing is to keep themselves like, physically keep it tight.
Yeah.
Like that's their entire worth, and they literally can't deprogram that from themselves. And I think as much as I was a child of the 70s, which should have been sort of like be comfortable with yourself, love yourself, but free to be you and me.
It's like the hot dish mom, right? Yeah. eat. Yeah.
But yeah, it's in there. So which is I think when you turn, like I remember my 40th, I had a wake for my 40th birthday.
Oh my gosh.
We had it at an Irish bar. No, it was fun. It was like celebrating. It's like okay, celebrating the death of my 30s basically. And we had a wake at an Irish bar, and it was a lot of fun. But it was also sort of like now I'm moving into the not hot decade.
Yeah.
And I remember, so I was doing commercial auditions. I was doing commercials and stuff in my 30s, and just getting tons of auditions. Just like, every week had auditions, and after I turned 40, I mean, they definitely it was remarkable how much it went down. But the ones I did get, I had a couple in a row where they have like this description. You get an audition notice, and it's like, what the character is or whatever, and how they should look for the part. And I had a couple in a row that said must not look over 40.
Yeah.
And I mean that's not a subtle message, and leave it to Hollywood to say the quiet part out loud, right? Like Hollywood and this isn't Hollywood, it's Minnesota commercials, for crying out loud. Even there, I mean, this is for some retail, like clothing retail store or something. So it wasn't even about the role wasn't even about like being a mom of a 5-year-old. It was just for like a clothing store.
Yeah.
But they wanted, and like the description
Terry,
was like
I'm giggling
hip,
because
stylish.
I remember this conversation with you, and you were like, "Okay, it's fine. I'm ready. I'm going to do the Poise Pad commercial. Like, like if this is what I must do, I'm transitioning to the Poise Pads."
The boys, I was like, I guess I'm gonna just take a break and then do like Viagra commercials and like pharmaceutical ads.
That was something I used to joke around. A woman who was the chairman of an agency I used to work at, that was our joke, is like once we had that place where most of the agencies won't have us anymore, we were gonna open an agency called Hot Flash, which was only like like Poise, like Activia, what's the Boniva, like the calcium, the Sally Fields, like calcium pills, all of that. And we were like, ha ha ha, that's hysterical. But you could kind of like, we're kind of both looking at each other like,
oh yeah.
Maybe we should do that. That might be awesome.
Might actually be a good idea in a way to like stay relevant, is to just acknowledge the.
But that's a funny thing though too, is like even the thought, like that's a joke to think about opening an agency catering to products for menopausal women, because those aren't cool.
No,
like those aren't like, that's not a career trajectory for cool advertising people to want to do that. And it's like, wait, they're spending a ton of money. We could get super rich doing this. Why are we like, we wouldn't do that, would we?
And you've just brought up a plot point, right, from Hacks, like. What's her name? Ava thinks it's so depressing. Right? That Deborah's hacking this stuff on QVC, and the stuff that she's trying to sell is compression socks and menopause vitamins and stuff that is
Ava's
like
horrified.
Oh my God. And she thinks how depressing that you're making, like you're doing that. Like you're bringing yourself down. Yes. And her perception was like, people need this stuff and let's make it fancy and cool, and I'm getting money to do this.
I think what Deborah was recognizing, and I wish we could do this, is where I wish we would shift, is that there are lots and lots and lots of people out there over 40. And if by ignoring them in advertising, in television, in jobs, in companies, by just kind of pretending they're less relevant or less visible, I mean, from a business perspective, we're missing opportunities, but also like, there are people out there buying compression socks and Activia and whatever.
And reading glasses.
And reading glasses. And this idea we have that it's not sexy, it's kind of my point. That like somehow you can't be sexy, you can't be interesting, compelling, motivated. I don't know, there's just like those words that we think of when we think of like who's interesting in society. We don't think of older people. We want, like, and in the workplace.
But that goes back to the Golden Girls-ish of stuff. Like we picture a certain age, and it's like all of a sudden it's like roller set hair versus. Do you guys know the brand Caddis? I don't know if I'm saying it right. Caddis. It's basically reading glass. It's like cool people reading glasses, and they have a cool site and all the people, and it's like it reflects like what Gen Xers over 50 look like, which is like I saw you have like an amazing tattoo on your leg.
Thank you. Oh, it's hidden. Yes. Thank you.
Like this is what like 50 looks like now.
Right.
Yeah. So I think that what that's looked like has changed, but it's also like I think we're starting to go away is also that sort of like, this looks like Golden Girls. Like, I mean, I love them all, but like, I always thought they were in their 70s.
Yeah.
So so the other question I wanted to ask you guys is, when you come to a job, it seems like what I'm hearing from women, and I've experienced myself, is that you get to a certain point where having a bunch of experience is no longer viewed as a good thing. That somehow it's threatening, or people don't like it, or it doesn't lead to the corresponding job that reflects your experience. That maybe you have too much experience, or are you sure you don't want to be, you just want to be an individual contributor, but you have all this experience. Are you going to be happy because we don't have anything, leadership before you? I don't know. I'm just wondering. It just seems like we don't recognize or value experience after a certain point. That's what I've noticed.
I don't think it's that they don't value the experience. I think when you said the threatening thing, I think that's also, we just get more comfortable with being. I mean, I think women more than men, and this is a massive generalization, like I think we say more the thing that we think, how we think things should be going. We're much less sort of work in the room, and much more like, this is what I think needs to happen for this is the right thing to do.
Okay.
I think we're a little bit more vocal about that. And then the more experience we get, the more confident we get, the more just older we get, the more you're just sort of like, no, I'm just going to tell you what I think.
So we just become a pain in the ass.
We can become, yeah, and I think, we become, I think intimidating and probably what some people consider to be a pain in the ass. And
Right.
I've definitely worked with a lot of men that are similar experience or less than myself, who are peers or bosses, who I think are like, who will talk, I've been shushed, who will talk over me, like, and, and I'm at the age where I'm like, I won't put up with that. I'm just gonna like tell you what I think. And I think it's threatening.
Okay.
And I think it's, I think we're all the things that maybe younger women don't have the confidence yet to do, which is kind of loud and sometimes bossy and sometimes sometimes a little bit of a pain in the ass. And I think that's the thing that
Okay.
But
sets
isn't
people
it
off.
interesting? I mean, even in the way you're describing that,
I know
I
it all sounds
agree.
really negative.
No,
Yeah.
I agree completely. And that's exactly how it's perceived.
Yeah.
That we're being a pain in the ass or bossy
Yeah.
or, but I feel like we're being assertive and clear and confident.
Yes.
And using our wisdom and
knowledgeable.
experience
Yes.
to contribute.
Right? Yeah.
But it doesn't get
Because I don't think it's the
taken well
experience. We'll point to my hair right now. So I started getting white hair when I was in college. I started finding white hairs, and I had dark brown hair for like most of my adult life. Like been coloring it for a million years. Really wanted to grow it out, and I kept working with these guys that had like similar hair to me, had let it all grow out. Everybody's like silver foxes. They're all silver foxes, and their hair was just them wearing their experience.
Yeah.
And everybody's like, they're silver foxes. They have all this experience, blah blah blah. And I was scared of letting my white hair grow out because it's like that doesn't scream to me like for people about me experience. It screams like hag.
right.
So and then finally I was just like, it. Like, I'm just gonna let it grow out. I even like when COVID started, it was like, okay, this is the time I should do it, and I'm like, I'm not ready because I'm not ready to be perceived that way yet.
Yeah.
I also have full disclosure, have a 5-year-old son, so I'm a super old mom with a super young kid, so that was another thing too. With like, I don't want to, and I've definitely picked him up, and people are like, Hugo, your grandma's here,
I know.
which is like, which is the knife in the heart. But I finally was just like, it. I'm letting my hair grow out. I'm like, this represents all of my experience. This also just represents I'm a premature grayer too.
Yeah.
But like, and I'm so happy now that I've done it.
Yeah, why is there like more value in you dyeing your hair? Right? Like who?
Well, because I could lie about my age more. Not that I would go out and tell people I was a different age, but people just assumed I was younger. So I was comfortable like losing the value of that visual perception of my experience. I was okay getting rid of that in exchange for people potentially thinking I was 10 years younger than I am.
Yeah. But what a planful decision that I'm not sure men have to make. You know what I mean? Like
they just let it grow out,
Yeah.
and then they're like, oh yeah, he's a silver fox.
yeah.
Yeah. But I still do the ends. I'm doing the ends blue, because I still
it's fabulous.
it gotta have to be a little cool.
One question that I was having as I was thinking about this topic is we're trying to figure out what is it about age, like what is it about being younger that adds value to being younger. And one question I was wondering about is it possible that we value, in the work environment at least, that we value potential over experience, that we want people who have high potential, we want people who are ambitious, but still like kind of going in this direction versus people who are like in that place of wisdom and knowledge and experience that maybe, I don't know, do we get more excited by potential?
Is it potential or is it, I think you kind of hit on it when you were talking about hacks, is I do think she's a little closed off to new things, and I think that's the flip side of that. Is I think younger people they'll try more things, they'll try more avenues. I know for creatives, like they come back with like you kill like 90% of their ideas, but I love like all the roads they went down. Because they'll just try more things where I think I know the answer to. I think I know what the answer is, and I'm not as open to happy accidents and pleasant surprises, which is what I think again, like the yin and yang of like having those two groups together.
Yeah.
If you can be accepting, because for the most part, I do know how to close off most of the doors that I don't need to go down. It just saves me time.
And on that too, just I think again back to hacks. I think it was interesting that like what was going to save her career was a younger person, right? But it was still her career. So it was still like she was still in her context. And so to just supplement her context with like new flavor, like is a is a bad idea, right? Like it just doesn't work that way. And I found it really profound that she like literally and figuratively lost her audience because she was old, right? Like people stopped looking at her. She became less of a desirable person, right? And so she literally lost her audience. And then the idea was that she would gain an audience then if she had like new, more contextual information to add in to like her context, which doesn't even make sense, right? But like in order to save yourself, to regain your audience, whether it be men, your comedy audience, whoever your audience is, you have to act young. Or sound young, or sound not like
that's
yourself.
That's the messaging. Is you need to get the Botox and the facelift, and then get on TikTok and do the trendy things, which isn't being authentic to who you are. And so I'm glad that Deborah kind of went off. Didn't try to do that, although she does the plastic surgery and everything. Side note, and then I want to just I want to ask you guys a final question about this because we're almost at time already. But I remember in my 30s thinking, oh, Botox and face, like that's so sad. Like, why do women do that? It's so sad. And then hearing other people talk about it as vanity, as like, oh, women are so vain. And then as I got into my mid to late 40s, I was like, oh no, they're doing it to stay visible. All this stuff is just so people keep because they don't want to just disappear into the background. That's what plastic surgery is about. It's not about vanity or whatever. It's about, I don't want to. It's like what you're wondering about the hair. It's like I want to keep pretending I'm young so people still pay attention to me and give me jobs and want to date me if I'm single and like.
Well, I think there's a little bit of like feeling myself because at the end, like you're still feeling.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm always like when I kind of look at my skin in the morning, I'm like, who is
That's
that?
true. You want your out here to match how you think
how
of
I
yourself.
feel on the inside.
Absolutely. There is that too. There's that weird like seeing pictures of yourself and going, oh God, that's not how I feel like I look. So I really wish we could go on longer about this, but what do we do about it? Like, what do we do as women to stay relevant in our careers, to stay relevant in society? And
I mean, I think a lot of it is also just like quit giving a fuck about whatever, like if we're visible or not, and just shove ourselves out there. I think we have a lot going for us. I mean, I think there's a couple interesting things. I think one is when you look at all the happiness studies and things like that, the women in their 50s, and like that's supposed to be like one of the happiest decades of your life. Because you've like, you know who you are, you've gotten past all the insecurities.
And maybe it feels good to be invisible in some ways. You know what I mean? You don't have to pretend.
Don't have all the pressures. Yes. Yeah, there aren't all the pressures of like giving, like I have a banner in my office that says like 0 left in my pocket, which is like true. And there's something very liberating about like I have no left to give about what people think about me, and that can make you very happy because I've stopped spending so much time being concerned about that. And I do
which
think
they do mention in that Amy Schumer sketch, the last day, where Julia Louis-Dreyfus is like eating the melted ice cream or whatever because she's like, I don't have to care anymore. Like I can just drink a pint of melted ice cream now.
Which I do think there's like a certain happiness, but then I do think the double edge of the sword of in a lot of our careers getting forced out is there's also a huge percentage of entrepreneurs that start in their like late 40s and 50s, and a huge amount of women start businesses during that age, which is like, honestly, maybe this is like, the universe's way of like getting us to do the thing that
we really wanted to do
and that we should be doing.
Oh, I love that.
So part of me is just like, you don't want me, you.
Right.
This is the universe's way of telling me to go and take all my experience that I know I have and like do things for myself. So,
which some women, admittedly can't do. They might not have the kind of career or financial stability or whatever to do that, and so they have to figure out how to stay relevant enough.
Yeah.
Because if you get laid off in your 50s, you're a woman who gets laid off in your 50s.
Oh yeah.
You are kind of it is not good. Like
no, I got laid off a few months ago. It's like terrifying. It's super terrifying. But then you get to the point where you're like, well, I need to quit waiting to find approval from other people and for them to, it's got to be on me, and I'm gonna do whatever I need to do versus like continually hoping that I'm like let into certain clubs that I'm like, I'm just gonna kick other doors open myself.
Yeah.
So that's the way to do it, huh? Like, just like, isn't there any way we can convince other people to just keep viewing us as relevant in our jobs?
No, I mean, and that's like that's a sad way into
can we
potentially
change everyone else?
Yeah. I don't know. When you're talking about that, I just keep thinking about my kids and saying how one of them keeps reminding me that representation is important. Representation is important. And they're explaining to me why representation is important. And so I think there's hope in that too, right? Like, because we're having this conversation, there's more actresses working besides Meryl Streep. There's
a couple more.
Maybe
up to 5
themselves
now.
in there. They're just like, I'm going to start my own projects. I'm going to like start my own production company so I can make projects featuring.
It's not an easy
No.
way towards representation, but in some ways, like being out there and being there and in your job and saying, I'm 50, here I am. That's representation.
So maybe that's part of it too, is stop apologizing for our age.
Yeah.
Well,
that could be a
I know
first
there's
step,
a big thing on LinkedIn right now with a bunch of people, but it's like there's that whole say your age, like put that out there, and that kind of asking all women, probably over 40 to start like say your age.
Ooh.
You need to put it out there, because then again, to representation, like a lot of people won't even know. They're like, oh, this is 50. Like, oh, Laura's 50. This is what 50. Like, I don't think when you're in your 20s, you don't even know. Like, it's just like they're senior people. Like, I don't even know how old that is or what that looks like or what 50 looks like. And
so rather than obscuring your age and lying or just not
do the hard thing and say
hard thing.
Yeah.
Do the hard
and say this is my age, and start to change those images and stereotypes that people have, so that they maybe slowly change their perception of what we're still capable of or what we still bring to the table.
Yes.
And I like your suggestion too of that you mentioned a little bit ago of like staying open to new ideas. Maybe there's something to be said for having that wisdom and experience, but not letting it make you rigid. Like still listening to younger voices and not using reverse ageism to say like, what the hell do you know?
Right.
You're 20 something. You're 30. Like, come on. Recognizing that they actually might have something to bring to the table as well.
But I do think we've let other people define what that looks like.
Yeah.
And it seems like the key is like we just need to define we need to get comfortable with it, and we need to put it out there, and we need to define what that is versus, I can only be invisible if I care what other people think about me.
Yeah.
Right.
And clarify clarity and assertiveness and confidence and those other kind of flip-flops of kind of how we feel internally and what we hear other people saying or thinking of us that make us quiet our voices.
Right. And not being afraid, because I think a lot of women are afraid to speak up because they're afraid they're going to lose their job. And then what are they going to do? I'm going to look bitchy and whatever. And that maybe if more of us just find good ways, effective ways of communicating our experiences of ageism and whatever, that maybe that we can start to turn the tide. So. But I guess that's it.
I think it's congratulations on turning 50.
Yay, happy birthday.
Remember that happy statistic about the 50s are supposed to be your happiest?
Well, I sure hope it's better than my 40s, because the bar is pretty low for it being better than that decade, quite frankly.
It's all, you did all the work to to set yourself up for 50, so your 50s can be awesome and amazing.
Oh, thanks.
So welcome.
Thank you guys for being here to help me celebrate my half century.
Thanks
on
for
the planet.
Invitation. I was so honored to be here.
Yeah.
And you're making 50s look great too.
Wow.
Gotta put it out. Just put it out there
kind.
and make everybody go, oh, I want to be 50. That looks awesome. That looks great.
Right?
Thank you. Thank you guys so much. Really appreciate it.
Thanks.
This episode of When Therapists Watch TV was produced by Ellie Mental Health. Miranda Barker is the managing producer. Jesse Stenbrotten is the technical director. Our production team also includes Julia Galloway, Lucas Mooney, and Tu Pham. A special thanks to Lucas Fellini, Nick Seeger, and Mel Springer. I'm Dr. Terry Bly. Thanks for listening.